Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Amy Bruske and I'm the president of Colby Corp. I'll be leading our session today. And I wanted to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to spend some time discovering a little bit more about your strengths. I know that a lot of you went through your Colby A index before, but for some of you it's maybe been several years, some of you several months. So this is our opportunity to go in depth a little bit more with your A. Make sure that you understand some things about your strengths, but more importantly, how can you use that information to make a difference in your life? Whether it's to reduce stress, whether it's to improve your relationships, get more done at work. And my goal is that we will go through some of the basics of the information. You will know more about you and hopefully other people that you work with, but then have an opportunity at the very end to ask some questions as well. So I will be sharing my screen here and some slides a lot of the time. So I will be off video, but feel free, again, as I said, to chat in along the way if you have questions. Okay, let's get started. So let's talk first about why your result matters. And what I say to people oftentimes is most people spend a good deal of their life trying hard to find ways to increase their performance or how much they're getting done, understand what causes them stress and make better decisions. If you're like me, certainly you've spent time in your life doing exactly some of those things. And then when people get their Colby A result, I often hear, gosh, this is the missing piece of what I didn't know about myself, or this makes so much sense why certain people that I work with are more frustrating to me, why certain situations are more stressful. So I think that this piece of the puzzle is what we need in order to understand what drives our behavior, and therefore be able to make different decisions along the way. And one of the things that I want to make sure and stress for all of you is these instincts that we're going to talk about today, these striving instincts that are measured on your Colby A index, are what you can count on when you're going through change, when you're going through a crisis. This is the one thing about you that is unchanging and that you can rely on to get you through and make good decisions. And this is absolutely what drives us here at Colby Corp. We are a mission-driven organization. We've been around for over 40 years, and our mission is to help people understand their own and other people's instinctive strengths, and then use that understanding to improve their lives in ways that they care about most. So I ask you that now, what matters to you most? What do you need to focus on? And let's figure out a way that getting this information is going to help you put into play some decision making and some ways to just make your life a little easier. Because I really do think that is the secret to performance and to having more joy at work as well. So the model that we're going to use today are these 3 C's of success. People often ask, why are some people more productive than others? And in our experience, what we've found is that they have the following 3 things. The first is they've got some real clarity around who they are. So they're very clear about what comes easy to them, what they do very naturally, and they're constantly exploring what more they can find out about themselves. But going beyond just having clarity of your strengths, they are able to use that mental energy productively every day. And we call that commitment. In other words, you commit your energy in ways that are strategic and effective for who you are. And then lastly, it's all about collaboration. So you cannot do everything, and no one person has strengths in all of the different ways that Colby measures. So you have to figure out how to work with other people effectively, when to work independently, and when to collaborate. So we're going to use this as our model today as we go through your results. And we're going to spend most of our time on clarity. It's just the first step in the whole process. And then I'm going to give you some tips on how you can move forward in the other ways. Okay, so clarity. Let's talk about this and really knowing your strengths. And the most important way and the model that we use in order to get a full picture of who you are is your strengths in all 3 parts of the mind. These include your thinking strengths, your feeling strengths, or your doing strengths. And we're giving you the most simplified language with those 3 words, but if you look right underneath each of those words, the more formal way to say these is the cognitive, the affective, or the conative dimensions of the mind. Now, ancient philosophers talked about these 3 parts of the mind. These have been around for many, many years. So here at Colby Corp, we did not invent this model, but what we have done is tried to focus so that everybody knows their strengths in all 3 parts of the mind so that you can more effectively know what decisions you need to be making about how to spend your time. So let's dissect this a little bit in the thinking part of the mind. Oh, and by the way, your sweet spot, here the picture of the candy hopefully is enticing thoughts about what is sweet. Your sweet spot, or when you're in the zone, is where all 3 of these are aligned. So in any given situation, you want to be working with your strengths in all 3. And that is the goal. Obviously, there are many things that you have to do on a daily basis that maybe are not as great of a fit, but the more that we can have alignment, things come with less effort to you and less stress. So let's focus on the cognitive first. The cognitive part of the mind is all about your skills, your knowledge, your learned behavior, experiences. It really is a picture of what you can do or what you're capable of. So think about, this is your years of experience in certain kinds of positions or industries. This is also drives your behavior. Say, for example, things you do at home, like you learned there's one right way to fill the dishwasher. Guess what? That's just learned behavior or habits that you've gotten into along the way. And that's one picture of who you are and what comes easily to you as well in the cognitive. Now, beyond your skills and what you can do, we also look at this affective part of the mind, or what we call the feeling dimension. This encompasses your motivation, your preferences. This has everything to do with your values, your personality type. So I'm sure a lot of you have taken assessments over the years or personality tests. There are some really common ones that we find in the workplace like Myers-Briggs and DISC, StrengthsFinder, Predictive Index. All of those fall under this affective dimension of the mind. And this is really a picture of what you want to do or what you value. So you may really care about certain things that others that you know don't. Let's take, for example, buying a new car. If you are someone that is going to really put a lot of effort into buying a new car, then that's something that's going to not only take your time, but probably your energy. There may be someone else in your family that really doesn't matter. They're happy to walk on the lot and kind of pick something that they like and they look at. What this affective part of the mind does is it drives what you care enough about to take action on. So again, that cognitive is what you can do, what you're capable of. The affect here is what you want to do or what you're motivated to do. And then this last piece of the puzzle, which is what we're going to spend our time on today, is this conative part of the mind, or the doing. This conative dimension of the mind is what we call your striving instincts. In other words, when you have to strive to take action, what instinctively comes naturally to you? What we know about these strengths is they're innate. We know that this is how you best solve problems. So it really is a picture of how you will take action. So I can do things, I want to do things. If then you're ready to take action, this is how you will do it most naturally. So let's dig into this conative really quickly. What we know about striving instincts is they drive your behavior. And Kathy Kolbe, who is the founder of Colby Corp and the designer of the Kolbe A Index that you all took, she was the person who discovered these striving instincts could be measured. So Kathy's very early work, before she even founded Colby Corp, was working with her father. His name is E.F. Wunderlich. He has often been called the founder of personnel testing. He wrote an assessment called the Wunderlich Personnel Test that is still used in the workplace and in various other industries. And so his work was about intelligence or skills or ability to reason. And when she worked with her dad, she had said, you know, I know a lot of really smart people who don't get a lot done. What else is there when it comes to getting things done, high performance, productivity, and he challenged her. He said, my life's work is about intelligence and capabilities. I challenge you to figure out what else is this missing piece of the puzzle. So her early work was working with children. And when she was working with kids in problem solving, she noticed that if she gave them an assignment and told them an end result that she wanted them to get, but did not tell them how to get there, she would see a very distinct pattern of how each child would start the problem-solving process. So again, with no direction, which is rare because normally kids at school are told exactly how to get something done, but told instead, here's the end result I'd like you to get, here's some materials to get there, but not how to do it, she would notice that there was a pattern or a need to start a certain way. And she was wondering, what am I seeing here? Because this isn't cognitive ability, and this isn't necessarily a desire to learn or do. What am I seeing? And that is when she started looking up this third dimension of the mind that had been written about many years ago that no one had really developed or dug into. So conation, or these striving instincts, are really something that is a natural way of initiating if you're completely free to choose how to get things done. So we're going to dig into that quite a bit. Your Kolbe A index results are basically measuring exactly what are these striving instincts. So if free to take action, how would you do things? And the A results are all positive. So in other words, there are no good or bad, right or wrong Kolbe results. We find that they're equally effective, they're equally important. In other words, there is no one Kolbe result that is better than another. And also people have equal amounts of mental energy available to them in this cognitive dimension of the mind. They're also unbiased. So we have done a lot of different studies to see if we see a difference in, for example, gender, age, or race in Kolbe results. And we do not find that there are significant differences, let's say, with men versus women. So if you are someone that has an 8 in FactFinder, the long red line, just know there's just as many men as women that have that same result. There are just as many people that are different ages, so 20-year-olds versus 70-year-olds. So we don't find that there's any inherent bias in this cognitive dimension of the mind. And then lastly, it's unchanging. And I really want to hammer home this point to all of you. And that is that your Kolbe A index results do not change over time. Or I should say your striving instincts are something that is innate and unchanging. It's an incredibly stable trait and part of the mind. So where cognitive tests change over time, where affective or personality tests change some over time, we find that this cognitive dimension of the mind is incredibly stable. So no matter when you took the Kolbe A index, unless you got a transition result, there's really no reason to take the index again. So let's talk about the A itself. When you took it, you answered by asking yourself, if free to be yourself, you would. So what would you do if you could take action completely free to be yourself? And I know that's a little bit pie in the sky because for a lot of us, we don't get to be free to be ourselves on a daily basis, whether it's in your work life or in your home life. But it's important to know what are the innate striving instincts that you have for problem solving, and then we can talk about what percent of the time do you get to use them and how to change that. So when you filled out your 36 questions, you were asked most and least, you got something that looked a little bit like this. Your Kolbe A index is a bar chart of results. Basically, you got 4 numbers. Those 4 numbers looked like a bar chart with red, blue, green, yellow results. One of the things I want to point out to all of you, if it's been a while since you went into your Kolbe result, is that you'll notice a picture of Kathy Kolbe on your result there and a little play button. There is some excellent audio that is a part of your online experience. If it's been a while since you've been in there, or if maybe you got your Kolbe result and all you did was print it out, I encourage all of you to go back in and look up at that result at any time and listen to that audio. As I'd mentioned early on, it's kolbe.com/findmya, all one word. So you can get right back on and listen to that audio if you haven't done that in a while. So let's talk about these action modes that are on the Kolbe result, and I'm going to quickly define them, but then most importantly, I'm going to give you a lot of different examples of the different modes. So we've got our fact finder, that is how you gather and share information. We all get information, we all give information. Follow through is how you organize and design. So think of it as this continuum that's going to look at how do you best organize and get things done in a way. Is it more sequential or is it more adaptable and random? Quick start is the mode in which we look at how do you deal with risk and uncertainty. And think of that as a continuum from someone who's going to innovate, jump in and try things, up to someone who's going to stabilize. And then implementer is how we deal with space and tangibles. So how do you handle space and tangibles? Are you someone that is more concrete or more abstract in how you get things done? We all take action through all four of these modes, but we will do it very specifically in one of three operating zones. So think of the 1 through 10 as a continuum of behavior. And by the way, a 1 is not any better or worse than a 10. So in some ways, I wish we didn't have to have the numbers, but they are there just to share differences really among people and see where you fall on the continuum. So if I'm a 3 in something and you're a 7 in something, we can kind of know where do we fall on that continuum. These three operating zones start with the bottom. 7 through 10 is how you start the problem-solving process. So if you will look at your Kolbe result now and your numbers, you will see wherever you fall in the 7 through 10 range is generally how you initiate action. On the other end of that continuum, a 1, 2, and 3 is how people counteract the things that they resist doing, or I like to say it's how you prevent problems. And then in the middle, 4, 5, and 6 is what you accommodate or react to. So as needed, how you will take action. And you're going to see how all of these play out when I give you all of the detailed explanations. But we all operate through all four zones, but we will be uniquely in one of these three zones. So these 4 modes and 3 zones make up what we call the 12 Kolbe strengths. So think of it as kind of this grid of strengths here, and there are key words on your Kolbe A result that describe why these are positive to you. So you're capable of getting things done, by the way, in any of these 12 Kolbe strengths. All of you are. What your capabilities are, back to what we defined, is really your thinking or the cognitive part of you. So you could get things done in a way that's not natural for you, but what we know is 4 of these 12 are most natural for you, 1 in each mode. So let's talk about this fact finder, how we gather and share information. So again, think of this as this continuum from someone who's going to specify on the 7 through 10 range up to someone who's going to simplify. Let's start with our initiating fact finders. If you fall in the 7 through 10 in fact finder, you will naturally start the problem solving process by gathering detailed information. You will research, and don't take the word research too literally. We don't mean that you are necessarily, just on the internet digging in depth. What we're saying is that you will be gathering information, and the research may come from asking other people for information. Whatever your best resources are, you will not move forward until you feel fairly confident that you have enough data or information to make an informed decision. You naturally prioritize. So you will take action by moving forward through priorities, and you will build on experience. So you will say what's worked in the past. And then on the other end of this continuum, if you fall in this 1 through 3 in Fact Finder, you are people who are going to simplify a solution or focus on the bottom line. So where a 7 through 10 is maybe going to get a lot of detailed information, a 1, 2, or 3 is going to take incredible amounts of information, condense it down sometimes into just a few bullet points. You're going to condense data, simplify the solution. And we certainly need people to simplify when we've got complexity going on. And then in the middle, we've got our people that naturally accommodate or review the data that's already been researched. They might highlight what's important, work within some priorities that other people have already had. So look at this fact finder now, and as an example, we know that there are certain roles and different industries that attract certain kinds of Kolbe results. So one thing that I've seen in our history is a lot of lawyers are initiating fact finders. They fall in that 7 through 10 because one of the requirements just to even get through law school, but certainly on a daily basis, is that they're very precise and that they're building on experiencing, they're gathering information. Then some of the most brilliant app developers, for example, I've found fall in this 1, 2, or 3 category, where it's someone that has to take more complex kinds of information and they simplify it down, and they certainly make it in a way where it's bottom line very easy for people to use, right? So we need people on all ends of the continuum, on all 4 modes that we're about to review. And an ideal team has people on either ends of the continuum and some in the middle. So I'm sure you can imagine what it would look like if I had a whole team of people and every single person on the team initiated in FactFinder. We would get into analysis paralysis. So a well-designed team that has to collaborate and interact very often in order to get a project done has some people in the 7 through 10 range. We've got some people also on the other end, on the 1, 2, and 3, kind of pushing back when we start getting into the weeds. And then you've got about twice as much energy in the middle, accommodating both ends. Okay, so let's talk about this follow-through. Follow-through, again, is how we organize and design. And the 7 through 10s in follow-through very naturally bring closure. They naturally organize and structure in the way you would think more traditionally that you maybe learned in school. So designing an outline. They will make sure that they finish certain items and get it checked off their list before they move on to the next. That's when they do their best work, is when they can bring things to closure. They will design plans. I mean, if you have someone that initiates and follow through in your work life, this is the person who's going to plan and organize. That they do that so naturally. So these are the people that really get our life where we can find things, right? They will put together a system so that we can have things where they're readily available. And on the other end of that continuum, we have people that are flexible. These are our people who naturally adapt. Those of you that fall in the 1, 2, and 3 category, you're going to vary your approach. You're not necessarily going to be finishing one item before you move on to the next naturally. You actually multitask and juggle several projects at once by nature. Like you may actually make that happen. You're incredibly interruptible. You actually get more energy from being interrupted, switching gears, and then coming back to whatever you were doing. And that is a fine strategy, by the way. These are the people that naturally create shortcuts. So when things aren't going according to plan, our 1, 2s, and 3s in follow-through will naturally jump in, switch gears. They do that very well. We can count on that. And then in the middle, we have these people that are accommodating as needed to whatever needs to be done. So this is someone who's going to maintain a system that's already there. So think if there's a process in place, this is someone who will accommodate. And they sometimes have a challenge if they don't have enough structure in place in order to accommodate. So it's not that they can't design a plan or a system, but it's going to be someone who naturally would follow a plan that's in place and maybe adjust it along the way. So think about our initiating follow-throughs as people like, we've seen a lot of pilots who have initiating follow-through strengths. A lot of our teachers have initiating follow-through because they are people that have to go back to a plan. So when a pilot's in crisis, they're going to go back to a checklist, and they have to certainly complete the checklist before they even take off. On the other end of that, what I see a lot is salespeople who live in the 1, 2, and 3 and follow-through range Because what happens when you're in sales and you're doing presentations is when there's not a response the way that you would have expected it, you need to switch gears. So I often find that salespeople are the ones that frustrate the finance department because they are not filling out maybe all of their expense forms the way they need to or do things in a routine manner. But when they're with a client and when they're selling, they're actually fabulous at switching gears as needed. Okay, so let's talk about Quick Start. Quick Start is how you deal with risk and uncertainty. And what we know is this continuum from people who are going to innovate up to someone who is going to stabilize. Our initiating quick starts tend to start the problem-solving process by just trying things. Experimenting is how they get things done. And they will naturally brainstorm solutions. So they are the people that if we have something that we need to solve, they're first going to come up with 10 different ways that we could approach it. They are incredibly deadline driven, and what I mean by that is all of us can be driven by a hard stop or a deadline, but what initiating quick starts do is they actually do their best work when it's the very last minute. So all of you that fall in this 7 through 10 range, just know that if you at school, you were the person that was cramming the night before the test, that is just in your nature. You can let go of some of that guilt and figure out how to use that in a way that's going to be effective for you. So instead of trying to change that, tap into that and use deadlines to get more things done. So our initiating quick starts, they tend to drive change. They're idea generators just by nature. Now on the other end of this continuum, our 1, 2s, and 3s and quick starts have a natural talent for stabilizing. They're incredibly important for our organization because where an initiating quick start might start working on changing everything, we've got these 1, 2s, and 3s in quick start saying, let's not change what's working. So they tend to be the ones in our organization that minimize risk, minimize chaos. They will protect what's working, or I don't know if you've heard the phrase, protect the status quo. That's actually an incredible thing that we have where we need to mitigate risk and actually have a stabilizing force saying, hey, these are the things that are working well. Let me help protect those things that are working well. And then in the middle, those of you that fall in the 4, 5, and 6, you're people that naturally accommodate change as needed. So where maybe you're not the one driving all of the changes, you will accommodate it as it's coming up. So you might adjust to change that's driven. You're going to sustain innovation. I find that people who are in the 4, 5, and 6, that react zone will certainly check things out maybe before jumping in, but you will accommodate it as you need. So in the workplace, one of the things that I find is the 7 through 10s I tend to find a lot of them in entrepreneurial environments. Anyone can be a business owner. Any of the 12 strengths can contribute and own a business. But when we find the entrepreneurs that are driving businesses where they're creating something from scratch that never existed before, those kinds of entrepreneurs tend to fall in this 7 through 10 range because they are experimenting and driving risk and change. And the 1, 2s, and 3s, I find most excellent risk managers who do a great job fall in that 1, 2, and 3 category. These are the people that are stabilizing. I certainly don't want a 7 through 10 and quick start running a nuclear power plant and experimenting. We've got to have people that know how to manage risk in a lot of our industries. Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about the implementer. Implementer is how we handle space and tangibles. Think of this as a continuum from solving problems in a very concrete way up to someone who's more abstract. So our 7 through 10s and implementer will actually build a solution. They very naturally demonstrate. What I mean by that is they communicate most effectively by being able to show you a solution, building a model, communicating with you face-to-face. They will read your body language. They naturally have a need for quality. So these are the people in your organization that are going to drive quality about physical space, about the tangibles that you have, maybe down to the paper quality, to a business card. These are the people that whatever is tangible and whatever is the here and now, that's when they do their best work. So think of it in technology. If you look at hardware versus software side of technology, what we know is our hardware engineers, the people who are actually touching, feeling, fixing machines, tend to fall in this initiating follow-through range. In medicine, we find that surgeons have these higher implementer numbers. So think about the fact that surgeons are actually using tools, or they're using implements. That's where we tend to find that initiating implementer. On the other end of the continuum, 1, 2s, and 3s are people who are going to imagine a solution. They don't have to see it to believe it. They will envision, and they will be able to describe without having to demonstrate. So think about the difference in medicine. Again, the example I gave you, our surgeons tend to be our initiating implementers, but if you go to a doctor who's a general practitioner or someone with internal medicine, they will be asking you a lot of questions and diagnosing you more in the abstract. It is not uncommon that a doctor like that will not even lay hands on a patient. They are really performing their medicine more in an abstract way versus someone who has tools and is actually using those. And then the 4, 5, and 6s in implementer, these are the people who will accommodate as needed the need for the physical. So think of it as the person who will get up and tinker with the copy machine even if that's not their job. Or those of you that fall in this, you will repair a mechanical device if needed or handle the tangibles. You are the people that if you are in an office environment where you don't really get to use any of that implementer, you might be using that on the weekends or at nights. We tend to find people using, they will have hobbies where they're doing things tangibly or fixing things just for fun. So the outlet for that is maybe still needed, that you kind of bridge the gap between the concrete and what's known here and today with the abstract at the same time. Now, I had mentioned to you 7 through 10s, we find them in medicine with our surgeons, maybe our chiropractors, technicians, those kinds of things. On the other end of the spectrum, 1, 2, and 3s, think about people that are in industries that are very intangible or abstract. So for example, any of you that might be in financial services, what you're selling is not a tangible good, it's a service. And so we tend to find there are certain industries where there are a lot of 1, 2s, and 3s in those industries. Okay. So we've gone through all 4 modes. We also have a type of result that's a combination of results called a facilitator. A facilitator, or sometimes called a mediator, happens about 10% of the time in the population. And what that means is this is someone that does not have any of their 4 modes that fall in the 7 through 10 range. So you could have one mode that's in a 1, 2, and 3, but basically you're going to be in that mid-range, the 4, 5, and 6, in at least 3, if not 4 of your modes. You are an ideal key or an ideal team player. Those of you that are in the facilitator mode, you're excellent at switching gears and really accommodating as needed, depending on the situation. So if I put you in a work environment where you're working as an independent contributor, you don't really have that opportunity to accommodate what's happening with other people as you would in your ideal scenario. So we want to make sure that you're on a team, that you tend to be our unsung heroes. Those facilitators are really the people that are accommodating what's going on. They tend to bridge the gap between the people who are initiating and the people that are counteracting. And so they're really key to team environments, but sometimes that's happening and we don't even recognize that it's happening. So you want to definitely celebrate those facilitators. We also have a type of result that is called transition. Transition happens when someone who's asked to fill out those 36 questions is not able to self-report what they would do if completely free to be themselves. And we all go through lots of periods in our life where you're probably having to be all things to all people, or you're going through tremendous change. Let's say you've had a recent job change, or you've moved, or think about all the fabulous changes that happen in your life, whether it's getting married, having a baby, whatever kinds of transitions you might be going through in your life. Oftentimes that presents to you a situation where you're not free to be yourself. So when we ask you, if free to be yourself, what would you do in these scenarios? Sometimes what you're having to do gets a little mixed up with what you would do naturally. And the algorithm tells us that we don't have a clear view of your exact result. So what you will see, those of you that have a transition score, is there's an asterisk under one of the modes. In this case, the one on your screen is a transition and quick start. And what I would encourage all of you to do if you have a transition result is to get back into your Kolbe result and listen to the audio. Kathy Kolbe does a great job of interpreting the audio for you. And in the printed result or the online result, there are 5 key questions to ask yourself before you end up doing a retake. And by the way, retakes are free. So I want to make sure that all of you know, if you are in transition, you can get a retake at any time for free. And we also have consultants that can help you with that. Okay, some things to point out to you about your Kolbe index result. First of all, on your very first page, for those of you that did print it or are looking at it online, you've got this congratulations section that gives you a fabulous summary of your Kolbe A result. So again, here is what your bar chart looks like, and it's that first paragraph right under congratulations. So this is someone who is a 5392. So this person initiates in Quick Start at level 9, and they got this great summary of their results, basically telling them you are uniquely able to take on future-oriented challenges, and then goes through the other things about how he sees possibilities, how he says yes before he even knows the end of the question in order to be productive. I encourage all of you to go back to that statement because it is a great way for you to share with other people a summary of some of how you do your best work. So my challenge for all of you is to ask yourself, now that you've seen the 3 parts of the mind and your Kolbe A result, what do you know about your unique strengths? What is unique to you in how you get things done? And we're going to start using that information now in talking about being more effective at work or when you are striving and reducing your stress. Okay, so let's talk about this second C. We talked about the fact that getting clarity was the very first C in the 3 C's of success. The second one is all about commitment and using your mental energy productively. And this is where I would challenge all of you to start thinking a little differently about what you are doing on a daily basis. Because we hear a lot about time management, but what we know is that you have this mental energy available to you in this cognitive part of the mind. And it's not about asking yourself only, do I have time to do this, but also, do I have the mental energy available, and making wise choices every day on how you're spending your time. So I ask you, do you feel like this, or do you feel like this on a daily basis? Because what we know is that stress tends to be a result of not being able to take action in a way that works for you. When you are aligned in how you have to spend your time and the things that you do, and you are aligned with those strengths and the kinds of tasks that come naturally to you, you actually get more energy. You don't feel as drained. You might have a really long day at work, but when you get to be in that zone, you might be physically tired, but you're kind of energized. You know you could do more of this. So I'm going to challenge all of you to find kind of the strength and the gumption to keep fighting for the freedom to be yourself. And there's a great area of your Kolbe A result. It's got this pyramid of energy, and it shows you a kind of a picture of your strengths and the available mental energy you have and how you would use those. So this is kind of your ideal amount of time that you would spend in each of these modes. So this is a pyramid of energy for the person that I was just showing you there, Eric, and you'll see that it starts with these green boxes. He was a 9 in Quick Start. And maybe get a mental picture of, these are 100 little boxes. Everybody has the same amount of mental energy, so every Kolbe result will have this same visual, but the little ergs, we call each one of those units of energy an erg, inside of there, those ergs and the distribution of those will look different. And so think about every single day, every activity that you do, kind of plucking off one of those boxes where you're using up your energy as you go. And as I had said earlier, everyone has 100% equal amount of energy, but this mental energy is incredibly finite. In other words, you only have a certain amount of this energy available to you in order to get problems solved. So what are some of the challenges to using your talents in a committed way? There are two things that we find. The first thing is that either you'll waste some finite mental energy along the way, or that you actually have to work against your strengths, and so that leads to a level of stress. And the low priorities tend to be one of the first ways that people waste this finite amount of mental energy. So think about all the low-level decisions that you make on a daily basis, whether it's what are we having for dinner? I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. At the end of your day, you're so drained and someone says, what are we having for dinner? And you can't make one more decision. You know that you've had a day where there's been incredible decision making that's gone on and you don't really have the mental energy available for something that is not a difficult decision. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence or cognitive strength to get that done, but you may not have any problem-solving energy left. I find there's a lot of discussion about just even making decisions on what to wear on a daily basis and some of those things. So if you're going to spend a lot of time in your personal life maybe solving some problems and getting things done, that might actually drain some energy on other things that you need as well. The second bullet point you'll see there is letting others steal your energy. What I mean by that is those little interruptions on a daily basis. The person who says, hey, can I ask you a quick question? Do you have a minute just to do this? Or for a lot of people, if they're working from home, they're getting interrupted constantly that, you know, maybe you wouldn't be if you were in an office environment. And every one of those little, a quick question, a quick problem that needs to be solved definitely adds up. So you have to start thinking about when is it a good time to deal with some of those things. And then that last bullet point I really want to spend some time on. A lot of people have spent a lifetime trying to change themselves. There is something about the way that they naturally take action that they have been trying to change. For a lot of us, that is because the school system did not work for you. Just so you know, in traditional school systems, you know, what we find is that children who are 8822 type of patterns, so initiating, fact finder, follow through mostly, tend to do really well in a school system because that's what we know about teachers. We have data on thousands of teachers and that is their result. If you don't fit into that structure, then you have been constantly looking at trying to organize yourself differently, maybe researching in depth. Don't answer until you have a fully formed set of details and in order to answer effectively, those kinds of things. So it's either a school system, maybe your parents had very different Colby results than you did, or you're trying to follow just general good advice out there about how you should be taking action. So our challenge to you is start shredding all of this good advice. We call this good advice gone bad. It's generally great advice about how you should be doing things or how you should be organizing yourself, but it may not necessarily be great advice for you and your unique strengths. So I challenge you to say, what are some of the things that you need to let go of right now about one right way to do things? I know if you think back to maybe your New Year's resolutions or what you're telling yourself on a weekly basis, look at that and then compare that to really your cognitive needs for solving problems. And if they're at odds with each other, then I would let that go. If they're not, then we can help you with some strategies around that. Okay, the next thing that we know is that it is very easy to get in a situation where you are working against your strengths. And I have a quick little activity for you to do, and then I'm going to ask you to chat in some answers on doing this. So hopefully you've got a pen and a paper. Those of you or a pencil and paper can write. I would like you to print your first and last name. So go ahead right now and just print your first and last name. And then as soon as you are done with that, I'd like you to switch hands. So if you're right-handed, put it in your left hand. If you're left-handed, put it in your right hand. And print your first and last name again directly underneath where you did that. How did it feel when you had to write your name with a hand that is not your dominant hand. Someone said, don't make us write with our toes. Very awkward, foreign, slow, difficult, not natural. So here's what we know about handedness. Handedness is innate. It is, we know that children, as soon as they start to write, little babies, they have more of a tendency to use one hand more than the other. There is a very, very small percent of the population that is ambidextrous. But for most of us, there is something that is more natural for us to either be more right-handed or left-handed. If we ask you to work against what is innate to you, it will require more focus. You have to think a lot harder. It's going to take you longer. And ultimately, you're going to get poor results. And yet, this is what we're doing with a lot of our days when we're trying to work against your grain. So the strategy isn't to completely change who you are, but to find ways that you can minimize how much of the time you're working against your grain. And when you have to, do it in a way where you either get help or barter with other people to do parts of what you have to get done, or you do it in a way that works more for your MO. And one of the places I'd like to show you on your Kolbe result that I think would be very helpful for you to find some of the key do's and don'ts is on pages 6 through 9 of your Kolbe A index result if you have it printed out. There are 4 different pages, and it's each one of your modes that says do more of this and avoid these kinds of things. So there's an exercise that we do in our workshops from this part of your Kolbe A result. But I'd like you to go in there and start asking yourself, how many of these don'ts are you doing on a daily basis, and what could you do to minimize some of that? Okay, so cognitive stress, why does it happen? You end up working against your grain oftentimes if you are working with someone that does things very differently than you. So what are my striving instincts or my strengths compared to someone else? Or my strengths versus how I perceive my job needs to be done? Or someone else's external requirements on how I need to get things done. And that could be your boss, that could be a spouse or a significant other, that could be your peers that work on your team, but there's some outside force that's kind of forcing you to do things in a different way. Let me give you an example. This is our person that I showed you in the beginning, Eric, 5392. When he first got into his role, he saw his role as an 8822. Now, this is someone who is the head of a sales team. And what we know now is when he was newer on the job, he did have to learn a lot, gather a lot of information, get his strategy going on, get things organized. But eventually we needed to make sure that he could get closer to that result you see on the left, that A result. The B index is a job profile, by the way, that we have available. But you can see already significant differences here in who he is versus how he sees his role. So one of the things that we did is we got him some help, saw if he could delegate a few things, and he started seeing ways that he could use his initiating quick start most effectively so that he didn't have that level of stress. By the way, this is also someone that told us that this Kolbe B result looks just like his dad. That's how his dad got things done, and there was one right way to do things in his house, so I think that there was a lot of trying to change himself with that. Okay, so my key question for all of you is in this commitment section, what is the strategy you need to employ to reduce your stress? Whether that's letting go of some things, whether that's figuring out maybe one task that you need help with that you've taken on your own, letting go of some things, again, is the number one way that people tend to work through that. And then lastly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the last C, but this is all about collaboration, and I just want to point out some key areas of best practice for collaboration and working with others. So it started with you knowing yourself and having clarity, and then it's how are you spending your time daily, so committing your energy effectively. And then this last part about collaboration is knowing when to work with others. And it starts with communication. As I'm sure all of you can imagine, it's just human nature that people communicate with others the way that they would want to be communicated with. And so if you are someone who's an initiating fact finder and you tend to give a lot of detail and ask thorough and detailed questions, you're going to have to pay attention when you're talking to someone whose eyes kind of glaze over when they've hit their fill of the data and the details, and figure out how to maybe help them get to a bottom line. So maybe you start your emails with that person to a bottom line statement and then put all of your detailed information underneath. I know that that's a very simple strategy, but those are some of the things that help tremendously. Or ask them, what level of detail would you like on this? And they will hear you in a totally different way. If you really want to influence other people and get them to do what you need them to do, you've got to communicate like they would need it. There's also reducing conflict. So we tend to have conflict with people who are taking action in ways that are different than us, and I'll show an example of that. And then if you are working on a team or you have peers, whether that's your family, hey, by the way, your family is a team, or at work, then figuring out what the strengths are of other people on your team and then how to leverage those so that people are really in a position to get help on things that aren't natural for them, and your team's working together in a dynamic way and an effective way. So on your result, I just want to stress that there's a section on communication and relationships. So if you have a printed result, that's page 14. There's some excellent information there as well. And then we also have a Kolbe A to A report that is something that we use to compare two people's cognitive results together. So it is an absolute, one of the best tools for communicating with other people and showing where are you similar, where are you different. So this is an example of someone I work with really closely. So this is me as a 3583, and she's an 8363. Shows where we might have some potential high level of conflict, but then gives us some really good ways that we can work together effectively. So in our case, we're actually a fabulous team, but this gives us where do we fall and how can we get things done effectively. The A to A results, there are no good or bad, right or wrong. Everybody gets the same amount of information. So if you're exactly the same as someone in a mode, it's fine. It's just as good as being different from them in that mode. It's just understanding which situations work for you, when to work independently, and when to collaborate. So I challenge all of you to start thinking about when you work with other people, how can you communicate your needs most effectively to them? And what helpful tip can you give to others? You have to start saying, here's how I do my best work in order for others to work with you well. Okay, so to wrap up with this, I want to share with you some applications, and then we will open it up to questions. There are Kolbe solutions for you in relationships. So we have personal applications of Kolbe, whether it's with your kids or with a significant other, for your own individual productivity, and then of course at work. At work we have solutions for your team, if you're a team member or a team leader, and also in hiring. So a lot of people have questions about how can I use this in hiring, and I'm happy to answer that more in depth, or you can get more on all of these at kolbe.com. If you're not already connected with us on some of our social media too, I would encourage you to do that. And lastly, I want to leave you with this one thought. So this great quote from Oscar Wilde is, be yourself, everyone else is already taken. What we know is if you can find the freedom to be yourself, not only is your performance going to soar, but it's going to be easier for you to have less stress and more joy in whatever you're getting done. And that includes in your most important relationships as well. So I'd love to open it up to any questions. You can chat in questions. And I see some that I will address already about getting some things done. What % of the population initiates and implements? Thanks for asking that, Scott. We actually find there's a fairly even distribution in the population in initiation in all 4 modes. Now, it's very hard to get general population data, but in the past we've been able to do those. Those are online. About 20% of the population initiates an implementer. If you're like some of our clients, you might be in an industry where there isn't as much implementer energy out there, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people that are like you. So we've got a question here about why is it that my husband and I have minimal conflict personally, but have a lot of arguments when it comes to running our business? Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. So here's the interesting thing. In our personal relationships, what we're doing a lot of the time is we're aligning on values. So that affective part of the mind or personalities come through. You probably agree on what's most important to you from a personal standpoint and how you're running your family. I tend to find that a lot of times at home and in your personal life, you're not striving. At least I hope not. If we're constantly problem solving at home, you're never going to have any downtime. But what happens at work is it probably means at work you've got some level of conflict when you're in your business because now you're striving all the time. You are solving problems. You are your four modes really come into play when you're at work, sometimes even more than in your personal life. And one of two things can be happening. Either you're somewhat different cognitively, and so there's kind of an inherent conflict in that anyway, or it might be, Jennifer, that you guys are very similar cognitively. So when I find two people have an exact similar result, let's say two people are both initiating quick starts, that either is helpful or sometimes it's frustrating because we don't agree on the ideas. I have an idea and you have an idea of how we should move forward and drive change, and they're not the same. So what I would encourage you to do in a work situation is run one of those A to A comparison reports with each other and see how that comes out. I'm an admin assistant and have a 7851. What would be the number one thing I should do to be most productive? Okay, 7851. Cynthia, thank you for your question. Number one thing that you can do is carve out uninterrupted time somewhere, even if it's 5 minutes a day, even if it's half an hour a day. If you don't have an office, which a lot of us don't, you can still have some kind of negotiation with people that says, I need X amount of time on a daily basis that I can count on to finish some things. So if you could do that, I think that would be great. We used to have where people in our office had little tap lights on their cubicles, and when they pushed the tap light and it was lit, it means, hey, I'm using my strengths right now and I'm focusing, don't interrupt me. The other thing that you could do, Cynthia, with your 7851 is plan for change and for the unexpected. So where I think someone with your result gets frustrated is when they have their whole day planned out and then it doesn't work that way. It changes along the way. If you can say, I know that about, like, anticipate it and see, 30% of my day is not my own or 50% of my day is not my own, then if you plan for that, sometimes that's a little bit less frustrating because you're not always going to get to everything. Okay, let's see. Okay, my first day included a transition result, so thank you, Craig. You were in transition the first time in Quick Start. I was too, by the way. I was in transition in FactFinder the first time I took it. My retake came up as a 4547. If the results don't change, how can I account for the changes in FactFinder, follow through, and implementer? Thank you for that. One of the things I didn't mention on the webinar was when you do a retake and you're in transition, all of the numbers can change. So where you might have seen a pattern of result in the transition, don't take any of those numbers literally. It was just showing you based on that transition result kind of where they fell. But we often find that there are changes in a transition retake. That's to be expected. I would focus much more on the fact that the very first time you took the COL-BA, in the quick start mode, so the degree to which you would drive change and innovation versus be more of a stabilizing force, the algorithm said we didn't get a read on that. We weren't quite sure exactly what you would do if totally free to be yourself, and that has come out clear now. So yes, that's normal on a transition. Thank you very much. Let's see. Tim says, I'm an 8813, so someone who likes to get a system or plan, but at home, when we need to do something, my wife says we need a plan a lot, I feel drained. I think that you put a question mark at the end, so I think that you're saying, yeah, you're 8813, at home you're not using that as much. I can really see that, and Tim, you can chat in with me if I'm understanding your question wrong. I'm an 8 in Quick Start. I initiate in Quick Start. I use that at work so much that by the time I get home, let's say my husband says to me, hey, let's brainstorm some ideas for this vacation that we are going to take, months from now. I don't have any initiating Quick Start ideas left to give. So that's the first thing. That requires striving. The other thing, though, is a lot of times the way we are at home, there's a lot of learned behavior there. So I know where I'm a 5 and follow through, and that absolutely plays out in my workplace. At home, I think I have a lot more habits that are about organizing and structuring. And if you had to guess just by knowing me in my personal life, maybe you'd think I was more like a 7 and follow through. That's just because that's my learned behavior and what I do. But yes, at home, you might absolutely not look like that striving you that is true on your A result. And that is because you're on downtime. You actually need to turn off or else you're never going to rejuvenate. So you really need to decide when you do need to make decisions, what does that look like? Okay. Oh, got a good question from Blake. Is the Kolbe A comparison good for helping marriages? Thank you for that. You absolutely could run the Kolbe A to A comparison result in a personal relationship, but the focus of that more is problem solving and getting things done more in a work kind of relationship. We know a lot of couples who work together, so it's great for that. We also have, though, what's called Takes Two, and you can go to takes2.com for that. It is an actual relationship comparison. So it has applications about how do you deal with your finances, how do you do chores at home, how do you take vacations together. It's much more specific to that kind of environment. And watch out, we're about to have something launched with Takes Two that's coming very soon that might help you with that. Thank you. So if anyone has anything else, you can certainly reach us at info@kolbe.com if you have any additional questions for us, and we'll answer them either by email or give us your phone number, and we'll be happy to call you. I really want to say a big thank you to everyone for being on our webinar today, all of your participation, and I challenge all of you to find the freedom to be yourselves. Thank you again for participating.